Welcome to this new video in which we build and paint the 1/35 scale US Infantry Scout set from Tamiya. Quick introduction. Okay, I'm recommending this figure set for beginners that are interested in painting miniature figures, the 1/35 military variety. The reason being is the detail that's on these figures and also the price point. The price point isn't as good as I thought it would be, actually being at around the sort of $20 mark. However, there was a point where I committed myself to never buying plastic injection figures ever again. Obviously that's changed. I've got these. I wanted these figures as soon as they were announced. I thought these were a highlight release. They will never be as good as the high quality original resin figures, but these are much more costly. So I'm recommending these because we have 5 figures for about $20, whereas one of these really high quality resin figures cost about, I think they're about $10 to $15 for one figure, okay? Now, if you watch video 1, is it any coincidence that the boxes are exactly the same size? Maybe not. Anyways, check out video 1 if you didn't. This is the second in a 3-part series. Let's quickly open up the box and see what's inside. I have had a peek, of course. We get an instruction pamphlet, and I've already opened these up. These sprues with the parts on. And check out video 1 if you're interested in assembly. I'm not going to go through it all again. All we need is cement, this side cutters, sanding stick, craft knife, and we're going to build these up. We're going to build them up exactly as the instructions, except for one crucial difference. We are not going to glue on the heads or the helmets. That's the only thing we're not going to do. So let's get into this. Okay, so we've constructed the figures basically in their entirety, added on everything like the all this equipment like the shovels, the canteens, the bayonets, the bandoliers of ammo. This guy, I had to put his weapon into his hands or else it's a little bit difficult. I had to pry that up. I think I can actually release this and fit it on later on. He's the only guy with the weapon currently. These figures, why am I recommending them, first of all, right? Well, the first thing I like is the poses. I think they're really natural and they really adapt themselves well to dioramas, vignettes, rather than the, shooting weapons at the ready type configurations. These guys, they really just seem from the outline, they work with one another, and we're going to see that later on when we do our diorama in the next video. And instead of just being a Tamiya fanboy and ranting on, the thing is that these are the best injection figures I've come across so far. I'll show you. This is the Jeep figure, and in all honesty, he's not too bad, from 1990s. But the fact that they build up these miniatures from all these different parts allows a lot of undercut detail. And the big one with these is that they recessed the areas to allow the pouches and the bandoliers to fit naturally and snug against the body. Everything is like that. Whereas previously you would just get the figures and then you get a load of tools and stuff that would be too far proud of the bodies and stuff like that. Are these figures perfect? Nah, far from it. They're limited by injection moulding. Hopefully you saw on the clip there, be particularly careful in cleaning up your seams, yeah? Using a craft knife is the quick way to sort of sort them out. Is there any improvements that we can make with these? Yeah, certainly there is. In some areas the detail actually does end up going soft, in particular around the tops of the shoulders, the shoulder straps, etc. go a little bit soft. And also the fingers are sort of like a little bit limited. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to take a little carving blade. You can also use your X-Acto, the back of the blade, and just sort of scribe in some more details, just to emphasize the areas. It's going to help us with our painting. And of course, it's only a few minutes work, so let's just do that now. Thought I'd just do your comparison with the resin figure. Yeah, the resin figure is always going to win, but to be honest, these are really good, seeing that they are in plastic. It's just that the resin is just a much crisper medium. The details are picked up so much better. Now, one of the common improvements that is suggested is to replace the heads, and in particular to replace the heads with this manufacturer. I'm going to show you a big problem with that, okay? Okay, on the contents it says that they're 1/35 scale, and somebody went on a massive rant about it, saying that they're not 35th scale, and he's actually correct. I'll show you that. I'm going to prove that to you as well. These are the supplied heads, yeah, 35th scale. And now look at the supposed 35th scale hornet head. They're just absolutely massive, yeah. So you can't, they're not compatible. You'll end up with these ridiculously oversized heads placed on the 35th scale figures, which will look absolutely terrible, to be honest. Plus they haven't got the helmets as well. So just point that out. I've seen people do this and it looks absolutely terrible. Yeah, and to emphasize the point, here is an Alpine Miniatures 35th scale head, and you can see it isn't 35th scale. Yeah, I know heads are all different sizes, etc., but this seems to be a common thing with these hornet heads. But they are still usable because, in some cases, the figure bodies are a little bit more 32 sort of scale. I'll sort of show you there. That is the 35th scale Tamiya head, 35th scale Alpine Miniatures head. And you can just see that these are basically the same size. So we'll not be using the hornet heads to improve these figures, or it's going to end up with some big bobblehead figures. Instead, we're going to get some spares, probably an Alpine miniature head, and change a few of them to see if we can adapt them to use with these figures. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is mount the figures. You've got an option here basically. If you're not really too bothered about it, you can just glue them on the supplied bases. But in our case, we're going to drill out the feet and super glue in wire. This is the process of holding them in place when we're painting them. So let's do that now. Okay, our figures have now been modified, and also we've got them mounted two different ways. I mean, there's loads of different ways, but this is just like if you don't want to use wire and super glue, you could also use toothpicks, and these are just held in by friction, they aren't even glued on. With the smaller parts, I'm using these crocodile clips. They tend to be really handy for holding parts that need to be painted. What else needs to be done? Let's have a look at the box art. First of all, what can we see? First thing is the weapons. They've got straps on them, and it would be common as well, you know, for the soldiers, of course, to have their weapons on slings, and these aren't provided within the box. There's nothing to make it from, so let's make up our own. We're going to try a couple of ways. One of them is this stuff. It's called play paper. It is extremely thin, like paper thin, plastic styrene sheet. And the other way we'll do it is with some tape as well. We'll try and detail the straps, so let's do that now. Okay, that's the slings done. I found out the tape was actually easy to use. Coated it with super glue afterwards. The play paper, really kind of nice, but it tends to actually just break in half when you try and bend it. So the tape, much better. The other way to do this with very thin lid foil, paper, many different ways, but let's do that. I didn't do every single weapon either. Thompson and one of the Garands is without a sling. That one specifically because I need to push it in between the fingers the guy who's holding it. Now let's prime everything. I'm going to use an airbrush. I'm going to use what I always use. I use Mr. Servicer, and I recommend you find yourself a primer that you feel comfortable with. Everything needs to be coated, especially the resin, the plastic, everything. What I'm going to do, I'm going to mix these up. I've actually got a pre-prepared black-brown mix. If you don't have an airbrush, of course, you can get cans as well. So let's get everything coated. Okay, so we've completed the priming, construction of our figures. Now it's time to actually lay down the uniform colours. Let's just have a look quickly at the box art. The box art is, of course, we're not changing the subject. These are late US World War II uniforms. The very distinctive, famous M1943 combat jacket, introduced 1944 sort of period, yeah? All of them are wearing it. They're pointing out they're not wearing, none of them are wearing M1941 jackets, which was a shorter length and it was a different colour. The suggested colour in the instructions just doesn't really help us. First of all, it's a Tamiya paint, and you could go ahead and just airbrush them the suggested khaki drab, but I would actually go and do some research on this. The box art is really attractive and I like this colour, but I think, you know, I'm not going to get too picky about it. I think they've gone a little bit too khaki in that colour. Doing research, the colours were olive drab, 3, 7, doesn't mean anything. Basically what it means is that the uniforms were more olive green type colour as opposed to the khaki. But nothing wrong with, you know, making some variations between the two. That's exactly what I plan to do. What I've been doing, I've been looking at different colour combinations. My first thoughts were to use the field drab as a base. I think that's still a little, it's quite good. It's towards the olive green, but I think I might add some green to it. and I was just experimenting using khaki and flesh and just making up some different colour combos to see how I do my highlights later on. US light green, that might be quite a good one with maybe just a drop of khaki inside it. USA uniform as well. There's quite a few different combinations. If you want a really faded, these Panzer Aces sets are awesome because you get the actual colour, you get the, this is not, well, it's sort of the base colour. It says US Army Tank Crew and US highlight for that colour. But if you mix these together, then you get your base, and that could be quite a faded grey-green. So I'm going to try and spray some uniform variations. I'm going to use an airbrush just because it's quick. So let's get on with that and I'll show you the result. Okay, let's make up the paint either for airbrushing or for brush application. Model colours can be airbrushed, no problem whatsoever. We'll make some up using this in this little bottle here. This is the 50-50 of the field drab to the USA uniform, and then to that mixture we want, this would be another 50%, so like 1-1-1 concentrations to start off with. No, sorry, paint 1, water 1, so add a little bit more water inside there. If you want, add a few drops of thinner just to help break down the mixture. Just a few drops is needed. Flow improver, not required if you're going to be airbrushing. If you're going to be applying by a brush, it may well help you. And then let's just sort of see how this looks. Make sure it's thoroughly mixed together. It's going to be quite watery, which is what it needs to be for airbrushing. Looks okay to me. It's flowing okay. Don't want any clumps inside there. That's very important. Let's add this into our airbrush right now. Airbrushing. All you need to do is, first of all, do a test spray. See if we've got the right. You see, it's kind of watery. Can I use it? Yeah, I think I can. So just start very, very gentle light coats, very low pressure, and just build up very slowly. People who throw this stuff on, well, that's your problem. You're not even airbrushing. In that case, better off to brush paint, and then the same thing applies. You just need to build up the layers slowly. You have to cut back to air sometimes and let it dry off. Don't rush it. This will go really quick once you've got your base layer down. Once you've got a layer of the pigment down, things improve. Remember, we're having to fight against this very dark undercoat primer as well. So it's going to take a little while just to build up the coats. If you go and do this, basically, you're just going to make a mess of it. You'll be constantly fighting against that as you're airbrushing. Just take your time with it, control it. I'm not even using a precision airbrush here, far from it. Make sure you get all your angles. The shading of this brown paint is really going to help here. Anyways, I'm going to continue with that and show you how it looks. Okay, that's the base coating done now. I quite like that tone. I think that looks pretty good representation of that olive drab. I did a variation on this guy here with a highlight sprayed from above. Also, you can actually see the particles of paint. You will be surprised how that will all disappear once we apply filters on top. So the idea here is that one of them is airbrush highlighted. I'm not doing any dark shading at all. The dark shading is all taken care of by the pre-shading, and that was quite simple. By using the airbrush and only spraying from above or the side, that means that I've sort of retained the shading in the folds of the cloth. So let's go on to the next stage now. Next stage is brush painting the highlights and also the shadow areas. We take our base mixture, put it down, and I'm going to use a wet palette. I just find it a lot easier because then the paints don't dry out so quick. You've got plenty of time to work them. To make the highlight, I use a dark flash mix, as I explained before. And then for the darker shades, I mix with the olive drab. Do about 50-50. I use some of this flow aid. It just helps with the brush painting. Breaks down the surface tension of the paint, so you haven't got like a watery effect. But now these figures got some texture on them anyways. So let's do that. As in terms of a brush as well, I'm using a number 1. You can use a number 2. Just make sure it's got a nice sharp point. Take your time and let's get this done. Okay, just a quick recap. This is all the shading work done. There's a bit of reflectivity on them from the paint. Some of them haven't dried matte. We're going to solve that later on, no problem. Anyways, we've got the basic shades laid in. The next thing is doing the web gear, or the, what do they call it, individual load equipment? Anyways, it's their belts, the bandoliers, their magazine pouches, the canteens, etc. The US Army at this stage, they had a mixture. Basically for the 1943 uniform, they took the same web gear and basically did it in more of an olive green, but at the same time, the original sand-coloured web gear was still around. So we can do a mixture in between, mixing them around. So I might do some green, some of the brown sand. Brown sand will be kind of nice. It'll create quite a bit of contrast to show off and highlight the web gear. Again, number 1 brush, take your time and let's get detail painting. quick overview again. These are the figures with most of the web gear painted up. Started to paint in the boots as well, just started off with a brown layer on there. We need to improve them. What I'm going to do now, I'm going to try and do a bit of blending. I did a little bit of shadowing with some burnt umber, but I haven't done the lining yet. I'm going to apply some brown glaze all over these figures now, just to get an overall sort of blend, just to tone things down a little bit. There we are, that is after the application of that filter or glaze, thin down paint, which has basically blended the colours together at this stage. A few more details to paint. The entrenching tools, you can paint the handles basically green or a wood effect, up to you. Some other small details to do, but the next thing we're going to do is the lining, which is going to be done with either a dark brown or a black, I haven't quite decided, and also the edging. Very fine brushwork. We're going to accent the details using that technique. Okay, most of the uniform and equipment stuff is done. There's still a little few more touches to do on these, but what I want to do now is the flesh parts. We're going to start off with the heads, and we're actually going to airbrush them because it's just a lot easier to defeat that brown undercoat. The hands, however, I need to brush paint them. It's going to take a lot of layers to do it. So we'll start off with the process of base coating. I'm going to try with two colours. Beige red is my favourite, but also I use a cork brown as well as an undercoat as well. So let's do that quickly now. Okay, in terms of the flesh tones, I'm not going to show you the entire process. It is too difficult to film, and I filmed it a few times, but I would just advise that you do try painting. It's the same thing as what I've been doing previously. You take your base, you get a light and then a dark, mix in between shades and just apply it to the areas that require the dark shading and the light shading. Really helpful is something like this, which is, I think it's from Shep Payne's book, but it shows you where to apply the shading, where to apply the lights, and you just follow this map of a face. Probably not a good idea just to blob on a wash. Blobbing on a wash takes 2 seconds. It isn't really painting. The 28mm guys are actually painting faces that are much smaller than 35mm, and they're getting stunning results. Now, I don't say that you're going to get absolutely amazing results first time. Some of you will, some of you won't. It just takes practice, yeah? But you'll find that painting will always produce a much better result than it would just blobbing on washes, etc. But there we go. We've just got a few final touches to go now to finish these off. Okay, so with the flesh tones done, sorry I couldn't really show it, really difficult to film. Check my Patreon if you want more information on painting the heads. But we're going to apply the supplied water stickers on the helmets and on the one or two of the uniforms. They're pretty garish, so apply them now and then we'll do the corrections. Okay, so I've got the water stickers on. A little bit difficult to make them conform, but they are on. Now what I want to do is just a bit of weathering. Also, yeah, with the decals, what I did, I took a little wash of the acrylic green and just tried to wash over the yellow just to tone it down a bit. Now let's do some weathering. I'm going to use this colour from Panzer Aces Light Mud, whatever you've got. Apply it to the knees, elbows, that sort of area. Just dilute it down and just paint it on as normal. Okay, at this stage, just coming towards sort of the end now, need to fix on the weapons, paint weapons, but I'm going to actually apply a flat coat on top of these now because they are a bit shiny, a bit of reflectivity going on. I don't want the helmets actually, I'm going to preserve the helmets. I'm going to keep them a little bit satin, but let's get the uniforms matted down with some matte varnish. Okay, with the figures basically complete, the helmet's on now. I'm going to add some weathering on the ones with the netted helmets. But let's paint the weapons. First of all, I'm going to do is airbrush the wooden parts of the weapons and then we're going to detail paint them. Also, we'll do the ancillaries like the walkie-talkie and the grenades. Okay, so for a few of the figures, they're basically done. I'm going to leave them like so. But if you want to use the supplied bases, I've just glued these on for now. The bases are a bit boring. Let's improve that. Yeah, well, I've got some craft paste here. What I'm going to do, I'm going to mix it with some water just to make it a bit more dilute. And then I'm going to sort of stipple it onto the bases. You can get stuff that's ready-made, that's the right colour. I haven't got any of that, but I'm going to use this water-soluble paste. We're going to build a bit of texture for these bases. Okay, once you've got the paste down, apply it with an old brush, by the way, and then just let it dry. And here we are, the bases are complete. Not awesome, but definitely an improvement. Have a look at how the miniature guys do their bases for wargaming, etc. And they do some amazing stuff, but I think that's okay, you know, better than the flat plastic. So these are the two figures out of the box with the supplied heads. Supplied heads, actually they are pretty good features and not too difficult to paint. I would say the result there, I did not take a lot of time doing the faces, but much better than just blobbing on a wash. That would be like my view of it anyways. I love these poses. I just think they look so great with these relaxed poses. And the other three, which you're going to see next week in the diorama video, obviously with the one of them's got a older Hornet head, and those two are the converted Alpine miniatures resin heads. Yeah, fantastic. What a great set of figures. I would recommend, if you're doing your first set of figures, maybe just do 1 or 2 at a time. Doing 5 figures with all that detail painting is a lot of work. But yeah, without doubt, these are the best plastic injection figures that I've ever come across. The big disadvantage is that there's very, very few sets. There's only maybe 3 or 4 sets, and Tamiya have announced a German assault group one. And again, they've sort of put them into the action poses, which I was a bit disappointed with. But anyways, that is the end of the video. I hope you gained something from it. And check out the third video next week in this series of beginners builds, in which we build a diorama.